Alrighty, welcome to Torah Tuesday. Today we find ourselves again in the narrative section of Leviticus, like we were last week as well. So there are two narrative sections in Leviticus, and the rest is instruction for the tabernacle. So this one is from chapters, I think it's from 8 through to chapter 11, or chapter 10, actually. And like I said last week, as we read chapter 10 today, you can only really understand the gravity of what's happening here if you have chapters 8 and 9 fresh in your mind. So let me give you a quick refresher. In chapters 8 and 9, we have the tabernacle consecrated and the priests consecrated. Now remember, consecration is the act of making people or objects holy so that they can exist in close proximity to God's presence. So that's what we have here. We have consecration. So once this has happened in Leviticus 8 and 9, then the ritual can take place. And we see that happening in chapter 9. The sacrifices are carried out by Moses and Aaron, and upon them being carried out properly, exactly everything was done exactly according to how God wanted it to be. Then Moses and Aaron can enter into the tent of meeting, and they don't die. That's the kind of moment of what's going to happen to them. They go in, and then they walk out, and God himself as a consuming fire enters into the temple, and the people all fall down and worship him. So this is a good thing. Like we said, this is God's stamp of approval. Now God is able to dwell in this tabernacle among his people because the sacrificial system has worked. There's a big moment. The priests and the sacrifices have worked. And then we turn to chapter 10, which is one of the saddest stories we've come across so far. And it's the same day. So the same day that God's presence has come in as a consuming fire, we read, Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense. And they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to his command. So the fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. So we have Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, are killed by the consuming holiness, the consuming presence of God. But why? What is this unauthorized fire? What's going on here? Well, I think most importantly, this is contrary to God's command, it says. So in chapters 8 and 9, we had everything done according to God's command. Well, this is unauthorized, contrary to God's command. Why is it unauthorized? Why? Well, we're not given an exact answer from the texts. According to some commentaries that I had a look at, there are 12 things that could have gone wrong at this point. So the exact nature of what's unauthorized about it isn't clear, but it just reinforces the idea that dealing with God's holiness is dangerous business. So we should tread carefully. You know, we don't know exactly what went wrong, so let's just be careful with everything that we do in God's presence. Moses actually points to God's holiness as the reason why this has happened in verse 3. And the point is that holiness, it ought to make us tremble. God is a consuming fire, and his holiness, his otherness, it can consume. The story goes on, and the bodies are removed to avoid ceremonial uncleanness in the tabernacle. Tabernacle continues in its service under the watchful and now the nervous eye of Moses, because he's seen how this can go wrong. And then chapters 11 and 12, which is what we've also read today. The story time has come to an end, and we are returning to the instructions. And here we have, in chapter 11, some of the most befuddling instructions in the Bible. The clean and unclean food. And then in chapter 12, you have purification that's required after childbirth. We're gonna spend some time next week talking about the idea of ritual cleanliness and purity and impurity, all of those categories, because I think having a clear understanding of that is really important. But today, I'm going to hand over to my friend James Boyer, who's recorded a poetic reflection on Leviticus chapter 11 for us. He listened to or was thinking about this late in last year, and so I heard him share this, and I thought it was really helpful. So check this out. It's a reflection on the food laws and holiness in Leviticus chapter 11.
G'day church, my name's James and I go to the 5 p.m. service. Last year at college I heard a sermon on Leviticus 11 and was asked to share a reflection upon my thoughts afterwards. And one of the things that stood out for me was considering how we follow a holy God, and often I'm tempted to take for granted the access that we have to God through Jesus. And considering the purity laws and the pure foods in Leviticus 11 helped me to remember how holy God is. Anyway, to do this reflection, I wrote a poem, and so I'd love to share that with you now. Don't eat these animals. Whatever, we got Jesus. Doesn't really matter now when or if or how we eat pig or cow. Who cares if it has split toes? And to the crux, I suppose, just be a good person. Because God only knows what you get up to night and day. But I can eat whatever I may. I just don't see the relevance, despite the preacher's benevolence, of rules and laws not applied to me. It's all good. I've got Jesus, see. Just be holy. Whatever, I get it. I got Jesus' get out of jail free card in my pocket. It's somewhere in my pocket. All the presumption upon grace, the testamental snobbery, the arrogance to roll the dice with God. No, it's not because I got Jesus tucked up in my back pocket, for the Jews had to make sacrifices that went up like a rocket to become pure and right and step 1 foot in your sight. And yet I presume a low God, my buddy. A God I can reach and grasp like fruit on a tree. But that's the God of my mind, not the God of the Bible, see? Yahweh of the Bible is so infinitely indescribable, so incredulously incomparable. He's not in temples of human hands, nor boxes made by human minds, that he might be chained to a post like a dog for passers-by to nod. And so in relegating Yahweh, I relegate my sin. In denigrating God, I head to the crucifixion of Christ, yet not as a passive observer, but as a participating officer, hammering nails with apathy and indifference. Just another day at the office, just another criminal on a cross, just Jesus on the cross. Just Jesus. Just Jesus. Just Jesus, may it never be that I speak of him with apathy. For Leviticus tells us I was impure and unclean, separated from the holy God, and hope could not have been farther from my grasp. No cheap grace to help me now. In God's just wrath and anger, I have earned his mighty scowl. But it was then that Jesus caught me, in my time of greatest need. His death has made me pure again, by grace alone indeed. But apathy is cruel, you know. It creeps in like a thief. It takes considering purity to help my unbelief. For by nature I do minimize the magnitude of God. I need constant reminders of the holiness of our Lord. But as our God is holy, too holy to comprehend, his grace for me is sufficient. It will never end. So be holy, for I am holy, says the Lord. And that's my reflections on Leviticus 11. I hope it might be encouraging to you that you can reflect on Leviticus 11 too. Bye.